This is a recording of the Kansas City Secular AA Speaker Meeting held every Saturday night at 7 o'clock p.m. at HJ's Youth and Community Center, 6425 Warnell Road, Kansas City, Missouri. This is episode 22, and our speakers are Cana C., Emily J., and John S.
Welcome to the Secular Speaker Meeting. I'm Cana, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Cana.
I have asked Emily to read our preamble.
Hello, I'm Emily, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Emily.
AA is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover. We have no dues or fees for membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help others to achieve sobriety.
Thanks, Emily. Our secular group attempts to maintain a tradition of free expression and to conduct a meeting where all may feel free to express any doubts or disbeliefs that they may have and to share their own personal form of spiritual experience, their search for it, or their rejection of it. In keeping with AA tradition, we neither endorse nor oppose any form of religion or atheism. Our only wish is to help those who want recovery without having to accept anyone else's beliefs or having to deny their own. During the meeting, we will pass around, I don't know if we're going to be passing around anything tonight, but
I don't have any money.
yeah, well, yeah. We don't have to worry about that tonight. And believe it or not, there's no one here who would like to introduce themselves. And I don't believe any of us have extended periods of sobriety that we would like to celebrate, but every day we are celebrating, so to speak. The meeting this is actually it is not a speaker meeting. It is a regular meeting, so to speak, where we will have a topic and everyone will discuss it. Unless one of you would like to introduce a topic, I've come up with one. The topic I came up with is I was wondering how people's ideas of what alcoholism and mental illness and those things, how our ideas have shaped our recovery, how we kind of think about these things and how that affects how we kind of it's kind of like there's a lot of stigma that's kind of attributed to, addiction and also mental illness that I know that some people deal with, but I realize that, I have a certain amount of shame or self-loathing when it comes to these things. And when I really think about it, I realize, there's no reason for that. And if anyone else was to express any of those feelings, I would be like, well, of course you shouldn't feel that way because, it's an illness. It's something that is serious and it's not a defect or, this shameful thing. But, I'll let one of you talk about it if you want. This doesn't have to be real formal, obviously, but I'll open it up.
Well, I can say a few things, I guess, to start off. Talking about stigma, about mental illness or addiction. It was the stigma of mental illness in particular was something that shaped me very early on in my life because my mother back in the 1970s was being treated for depression, real serious depression. And it was something that nobody in my family talked about. And, I knew that she was seeing a psychiatrist and every once in a while she'd get taken away and put in the mental ward of a hospital and so forth. But we just never talked about it. So it was something that I was deeply ashamed of. And, there was no reason for it. It's just the way things were then, I guess. Nobody in my family ever discussed it. It was kind of weird. Then back, many years later, so now this is the 1980s, she committed suicide. And that was stigmatized. It was like, I was only 21 years old, and it was kind of unusual for someone that age to have their parent pass away. So, people would ask me how my mother died, and it was like, I didn't want to tell them, So, and there was no reason for that either. So, I'm sure that all of that, and everything else that had gone on, but I'm sure that played a part in my alcoholism to a certain extent, because, the thing I liked about alcohol is it gave me the ability to numb any pain that was going on in my life. It kept me from feeling that pain or actually growing from it. So, so that was it, and so I got into AA, and one of the first things I saw when I was sitting down in my first meeting, I was looking at these steps that they had on the wall, and they had that word insanity in the steps. So that kind of triggered me to, feel like, okay, there's something wrong with me. And so immediately I was ashamed of my alcoholism and didn't want anybody to know. And it was just, that's just the way I was about everything. I was not the type of person that would ever ask for help because I was so ashamed of the stuff that I was dealing with. So now I've grown a lot from that. I don't feel the stigma anymore. Something that I think has helped me, other than just being around a lot of recovery for a lot of years, and I think our society has advanced too. But just learning a lot about the science behind mental illness and addiction. I have a brother who has schizoaffective disorder, and he's not on medication, so he's psychotic, and he is, as a result of that, he's homeless and so forth. And it's kind of, it's because there's something, he's got a physiological problem with his brain that's causing him to act different than other people. And what's unfortunate about it is, if someone has cancer or something, or some kind of a disease with some other part of their body, it doesn't really affect their behaviors. So people don't attach feeling or a stigma, I guess, to those diseases, because they're not affecting a person's behavior. But because it's affecting his behaviors, it's something that we all, But anyway, I understand it. It's a physiological thing with the brain, and addiction is the very same way. That what I believe, and from what I've learned, from what I've read, is that anybody can become addicted, because pretty much every human being has a gene that is triggered by a substance. And for different people, it's a different substance. And for different people, it takes a different amount of substances before that gene is triggered. But once it's triggered, the person becomes addicted to that substance and any other substance that is because it's doing the same thing to the brain. It's triggering those same chemicals that's causing that addiction. So again, it's a physiological thing. And so I understand that now. And and that helps me, I guess. That's how I view everything that I deal with. I deal with depression. I'm treated for that, and I'm watching I'm very engaged with my recovery from alcoholism and addiction too, because I guess I understand the two kind of go together, and it's not my fault. It's just the way things are. It's just the way it is. It's my responsibility to take care of it, and I try my best to do that. So I guess I'll start with that.
Thank you, John. Hi, I'm Emily, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Emily.
And I feel a lot of pressure to make this good. So, I am pretty open about the fact that I am mentally ill, and that's not really a new thing for me. I have been open about it for a while. I used to be very active on social media, and I'm not on it at all now. But when I was on it, I would post about things I was going through, and people would privately tell me that they found that helpful that I would talk about things openly and normalize my experiences, because a lot of those people could identify with those experiences. So I'm just a much more private person than I used to be. Like, I don't not want to talk about it. I just don't share information with as many people as I used to. But I have no problem talking about my issues in AA with AA people, because I think there's a pretty high comorbidity rate between mental illness and alcoholism and drug abuse, and I think a lot of people can identify with it. So I know I've talked to many people in our groups who also have depression and anxiety, among other things. So I think people really get it. And it's a good place to talk about it. I just always feel like maybe I'm talking about it too much at the risk of focusing on it more than my alcoholism. But the two are really intertwined for me. They're not really separate. Although I think like they kind of came together in a I don't even know how to say this. Like, they were kind of separate issues that kind of crashed into each other and just created a big mess of a person. So, when I was in college, I really liked college, and I had a pretty good collegiate experience, and I started drinking occasionally my freshman year. I had an older boyfriend who would buy alcohol for me, and he was in a fraternity, and we would go to parties at his fraternity house, and like, it wasn't excessive or anything, but like from the get-go, I was binge drinking. I was not drinking in moderation. Like, it was already illegal for me to be doing this, so I just thought, just go for it, and drink as much as I could in a short amount of time, because, who knew where my next drink was coming from, because I couldn't buy it for myself. I felt like I was like, a lot of women in college don't have this experience, but like, because I had a boyfriend and because of the nature of our relationship, I was extremely safe in those circumstances. And not everyone has that reassurance, and like, it didn't even like factor in to how I felt about it at the time. This is only looking back that I realized like how very lucky I was to be able to drink excessively in that environment and not, I don't know, I guess not worry about my safety as much as other people do. I don't know. That's a whole nother conversation though. Sophomore year, I really kind of stepped back from that and really focused on my studies. And then junior year, I studied abroad. And I mean, I wasn't quite 21. I was almost 21 when I went to England. And I mean, it was already legal for people 18 and up to drink over there. So we could immediately go out to pubs and bars and drink, and it wasn't a big deal. We still celebrated my 21st birthday, which was one of the best nights of my life. It was just a lot of fun. Like, I didn't get sick or anything. Like, I tried to climb a fence on a medieval university wall, but I think that was pretty much the worst of it. Yeah, I was friends with a lot of other American students from other universities while I was in England, and we all kind of went a little overboard with the drinking and the drugs and everything. And I don't know, we were all, away from home for the first time. We were really living on our own. We weren't on a college campus. We were in like townhouses or apartments. And no one was looking out for us. So like, I think, it's totally understandable that we just went a little crazy. And I'm not going to say it wasn't fun, because it definitely, at the time, it was a lot of fun. It was not healthy. It was not safe, but it was, it was really, I don't know, it was a very special time. And I'm glad I had that experience, even if it led to problems later on. Because when I came back to the United States, that was when my mental health started to deteriorate. I've never experienced psychosis, but I started to believe things were happening that weren't actually happening. And I think it was because of my anxiety. Like, I remember one of my sorority sisters had mono, and I think I had like eaten something that she had like already bit into. Like, I don't know, girls who live together are gross. I don't have any other explanation for that. So I immediately thought I had mono. I developed the symptoms of mono, and I got a blood test, and the test came back negative for mono. I did not have mono, but I definitely felt like I had mono, and I went around telling everyone that I had it. And people were a little freaked out by it, but I don't know. I didn't really think about it. And then the summer between my junior and senior years, I became absolutely convinced that the brakes on my car weren't working. And I would have other people drive my car to see if they could feel it. And they had no idea what I was talking about. So like I would be on the highway and my body would just seize up in what I later understood to be a panic attack, because I thought my brakes were going to fail and I was going to crash and die. And I even took it, like my dad humored me and helped me take it to a dealership. And they were like, there's nothing wrong with this car. And I just, one night, like I had to have my dad come and get me because I was so afraid to drive the car myself. And I just went home and bawled for hours because I felt so out of control and I had no idea what was going on. And I didn't know what was real and what wasn't. And then when I started senior year, I started having full-blown panic attacks almost every night. I was sleeping through class, which is not like me at all. I would skip the occasional class, but like not like this, where I just couldn't make myself go. My roommates were kind of being jerks about it, but I don't think they understood what was going on any more than I did. So I guess it's understandable. And if I had had a better understanding of what was happening, maybe I could have explained it to them. But like I would have people like my sorority sisters like come over to my house off campus and like sleep on my floor because I could not be alone. Like it was terrifying and I thought I was going to die. So I got put on medication pretty quickly by a general practitioner who we got to see for free as students. She was not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, which I think is kind of important because I think it would have been better if I had actually seen a psychiatrist to prescribe me medication, because I think there was a lot of trial and error that was unnecessary in those early years when I was being medicated. So so I got put on medication and it helped, and it also made things worse. I was on a medication called Paxil, which I think is pretty common. I don't know if they prescribe it as much anymore, but I was having like almost hallucinogenic dreams on it. And that was very frightening. And if I skipped a dose, I would completely fall apart and become even kind of violent, towards myself, not towards other people. And that was very scary. So senior year was just kind of a bust. I managed to graduate, and I think that was just an achievement in itself. I'd always been kind of a high achiever before that, and I just didn't care anymore. And then after that, it's just been years of seeing different mental health professionals, seeing different, psychiatrists, seeing different therapists, getting other people's opinions, and trying all kinds of medications. And some of them would work for a while and then stop working. And then some of them, wouldn't work because, and this is, back to the alcohol part, nobody told me, but it was pretty common knowledge that alcohol can make your antidepressants not work. And also that antidepressants can make alcohol work really well. It will make you a lot more inebriated than you would be otherwise. And I think it's very key that I did not make that connection for many years. Because I was drinking pretty heavily. And and also consistently on medication, and I was a mess. I would like have no memory of things I'd done, of things I'd said. The next day I had horrible hangovers. It was a very, very bad deal. And I think it was a lot worse because I think it happened. Like, I think I became an alcoholic because I was mentally ill, but I also think the alcoholism exacerbated my mental illness. So like, I really can't separate them in my mind. And so when I finally got sober, my medication started working better and I started feeling better. But I feel like I'm the speaker like tonight. Like, should I stop?
You can go off for as long as you want.
Okay. Like, sorry, this is getting kind of long, but we're up to like current times now in my story. So I've had a lot of really horrible mental health experiences since I've been sober, though. Like I was put in the hospital for the first time a year or two after I got sober. And I made a suicide attempt this last fall. And that was my first attempt. I had thought about it a million times since probably the age of 12, but I actually like tried it, and it was obviously not a success, but I was in the hospital for a while, and then I had to go back into the hospital. And then I was in a residential treatment facility in Chicago from November through January. And now I'm just seeing my psychiatrist and taking my meds, and things seem to be better. Like, I think they got my medication straightened out while I was in the treatment facility, and I got a new diagnosis called borderline personality disorder, which is still kind of we're not really sure whether or not I have it, because psychology is a really imprecise science, and it's a lot of guesswork, and a lot of like symptoms can be attributed to any number of disorders. But I was actually tested, and that was my diagnosis. So we'll see. That could change. I've heard of people being like misdiagnosed with either with or without bipolar disorder, and that's pretty common. Like, I think misdiagnoses are pretty common. So that may change. And I'm going to admit that it does make it harder for me to stay sober. Like, I have a lot of feelings on a daily basis that I just want to numb out. And I used to be able to do that, and I can't do it anymore. And that kind of sucks. I was using Xanax for a while to like numb out, and I really liked that. And then I realized that really liking that is a problem, and you should probably stop it before it becomes a real problem. So I don't take it anymore. But like, the temptation is always there. Like, it really is. Because I have all these feelings that are extremely difficult to deal with. And as far as the stigma goes, I don't tell people at work like what my problems are. Like, I was absent for 2 months from work, and I didn't tell a single person what was going on. Like, I think HR knew because I told them like what hospitals I was at, but they couldn't ask me about it. Like, legally, no one can ask you about it, and they can't like retaliate against you for it. But like, I did not offer a word of explanation to anyone. And I feel completely okay with that decision, because like, while I think there shouldn't be as much stigma around it, I feel like in the workplace, that's still really dodgy. Like, there are laws in place to protect the mentally ill and people with addictions, but there are also a lot of ways for companies to get around that too. Like, you can still be discriminated against for it. So I don't talk to people at work about either issue. I'm very open about the fact that I don't drink, because we have like work happy hours a lot, but I don't know. I don't offer an explanation. Like, people can think what they want to think. They don't really seem to care. Most people are really concerned about themselves and not so much with you. So that's kind of a nice thing. So I think that's all I have.
Okay.
Thanks, Emily.
And just so people, in case people were curious, you have a few years of sobriety by now, right?
I will have 4 years of sobriety on July 5th.
Okay. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
thank you, Emily. One thing that I think is interesting about alcoholism and AA, as opposed to other kind of mental illnesses, I consider alcoholism addiction to be a mental illness, because what else is it really? But like with other mental illnesses, I guess there are some medications to help with like anti-abuse or whatever, with craving alcohol or whatever, and then there's things like Suboxone for opiates, but for things like depression and anxiety, there's a lot of like counseling, one-on-one counseling, and it's kind of focused on the individual. It seems I haven't been to a lot of counseling in my life, but that's what it seems like it is for those. But without, alcoholism, the first people say when you need to deal with that is to go to AA. And that's, it's kind of different. I mean, and I really like that this is what I do as opposed to like, individual counseling. And I think that it's interesting because it really is the group that is kind of is helping you as opposed to kind of a professional. And I mean, we have some at least former mental health professionals who are in our group. But other than that, I mean, it's just kind of lay people who are like, applying this program. Some of us work the steps and kind of go through that. But I think that that's an interesting kind of difference. I mean, obviously, AA has been around for a long time, but, that's not, I mean, I'm sure that there are like depression support groups and everything, but there isn't really that culture for those. I mean, it seems like there's a different culture for, addiction and alcoholism. And I wondered if that's something you would like to talk about.
There are support groups for people with mental illness. I think there's one called NAMI, and I don't remember what that stands for.
National Association of Mental Illness, something like that.
Probably, yeah. They had, when I was, the last time I was in the hospital at North Kansas City, they had 2 representatives come in and talk about it. I've never been to one of those groups. I imagine that they are structured differently than AA, but yeah, they do exist, but I think you're right. It's not as much of I hate to say cult, but we're a little culty.
We are.
In the best ways.
It can be like a clique in a way.
Cliquish, yeah, cliquish.
We're the in crowd.
I haven't like given away all of my personal wealth yet, so I don't think it's a real cult.
No, it's not really a cult because you don't have to pay. Donations are suggested.
Right.
But
nobody tracks us down if we don't come to meetings and makes us come back.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember someone was making a joke on Thursday where they said like they didn't have $1, so it's like they might as well go home. Might as well start drinking again.
Can't never
afford AA.
felt that way. If I don't have cash, I just don't give anything.
Yeah.
And I like try to give more when I do have cash.
Yeah, I use all my cash for bus money, so sometimes when it comes around, I'm just like, I can't get places if I give you all my money.
Mm-hmm.
We really need to start using that swiper thing so people can pay with PayPal. I don't even carry cash anymore. Really.
Right.
Yeah.
Who does?
Yeah.
So, what else we can talk about? I don't know what's going to happen with this podcast, but we can talk about
something
anything.
that she said kind of made me think about, okay, I don't think I ever would have done anything about, going to counseling or seeing or being treated for depression had it not been for having a problem with drinking. And I'm not so sure if I would have even had a problem with drinking had I not done something about the mental problems earlier on. So I don't know. The two do go hand in hand for me. But something that you said, Emily, about how it's really hard to stay sober. It makes it hard to stay sober. And that was really true for me too. Because, damn it, I just had to do something because I was just, all I knew was to do about with these feelings was to drink. So that's what got me into counseling. And I went through all kinds of different counseling. I went through group therapy, individual therapy, and then finally seeing a doctor who prescribed an antidepressant for me. And So yeah, it was all, had I not been coming to meetings and getting sober, I don't think I would have had the, I don't know, the desire or the know-how or the encouragement from other people to even do that. But my brother, he once told me he wished that there was an AA for him. And they do have support groups for people with mental illness. Another one I was thinking of, it's kind of a weird name, Emotions Anonymous is one, Emotions Anonymous. And then the organization you're talking about, NAMI, is really, really helpful for the families of people that they do all kinds of things, but they provide tremendous support for families who are dealing with a loved one who has mental illness. And we actually relied on them a few times. Like when my brother had an episode up in Wisconsin, we called NAMI and they gave us some really good advice on things that we could do to hopefully, get him into treatment, which is really difficult because people have to be a danger to themselves or others. And that's like almost an impossible bar to get. But anyway, they were real helpful.
Yeah, there is an Emotions Anonymous. And when I was at the facility in Chicago, they had 12-step meetings every night. And they were different ones every night. And they were led. It just went dark in this room.
Have to dance around.
Cana is moving around to turn the light back on. But so I participated in Codependence Anonymous, Emotions Anonymous, and Eating Disorders Anonymous. And so that was it was interesting to see like the 12 steps applied to all. Oh, and I went to Narcotics Anonymous, which was like super cool. If I had that problem, I would probably go to Narcotics Anonymous.
Well, don't they consider alcohol a drug?
They do, and they were really welcoming of me. So I feel like I could go to a Narcotics Anonymous. I also I feel like it's almost like rushing, like a Greek organization in college, because when you're in the hospital, like these people come in from different groups on the outside, and they're like, "You should come to our groups." So like. The local like Cocaine Anonymous group came to me when I was at Two Rivers, and they were like, "You should come over sometime." And I'm like, "I really don't know. I've never tried cocaine. I don't know if I can relate to this." But I mean, all of our lives are a mess, so I can relate to that. And maybe that's what's at the heart of 12-step programs.
Yeah, and I know, like in our group, we don't do what I guess they do in some groups, which is kind of try to limit what people talk about to just their problems with alcohol. Like we have a few people who have pretty much just had trouble with drugs. And so, it's interesting because it is called Alcoholics Anonymous. It talks all about drinking in the preamble and everything. But I know that it's important for, I think it's good that we are welcoming to other people, and it makes it more interesting to have different kinds of stories that people tell about what they've been through, as opposed to limiting it to things that I think that's been important for some people as well, to not just have it be about having just drinking problems.
I've seen AA go through different cycles. Like when I was first in the program in '88, it was during a time when you had all these old timers from the 60s and the 70s or whatever, and somebody would come in like with a cocaine problem or something, and they'd say, "NA is down the street," and they were like they're really getting upset about these guys coming in with drug problems. But then it seemed like in the 90s, like the mid 90s or whatever, everybody was cool with it. And people were in meetings talking about all kinds of different addictions and that they were having. And it was no big deal at all. And it was like that for a while. And then all of a sudden, it seems like here just recently, some groups are getting real uptight about this, what they call singleness of purpose thing. And they start enforcing it. And I think they misunderstand it. Because, in AA, it says that the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. Well, if you're doing other drugs, and this is what's so about NA considers alcohol a drug. So anybody that goes to NA, they also have a desire to stop drinking, Mm-hmm. And, the guys that come to our group who mainly had a problem with drugs, they also don't want to drink. Mm-hmm. So they're totally welcome there. And the bottom line is, too, when you really get down to it, we hardly ever talk about the actual experience of whatever drug we were using. We talk about the getting over it, and whatever was causing us to do it in the first place. So it kind of becomes a moot point after a while. What drug you actually did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it should be like, I have unhealthy coping skills anonymous. Because, yeah.
That'd be quite the acronym.
Yeah. Well, we could think of something like Addictions Anonymous. It could still be AA, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Some people are picky. I guess there are fewer NA groups, and that's why some people, go to AA instead of NA. But I don't know. I've never been to NA. I do hear they have keychains. They give keychains instead
They
of
are,
coins.
and they're different colors. And if you get a lot of them, you have different colored keychains, and it looks cool.
So that's nice. That's
Yeah.
nice. I might go just to get a keychain sometime.
I have one.
Oh, that's nice. That's very good.
Yeah.
The thing about AA though is really weird though is they never really modernize and add new information. So it's like, during all this time that during the last 80 years or whatever since AA has been around, we've learned so much more about addiction and alcohol addiction. And in science, we now know that it's the same thing. When you're addicted to alcohol or if you're addicted to cocaine, the disease is the same. It's the same reaction that's going on in the brain, and we know that now. And so it's like, if AA kind of kept up with the science, they would welcome people with other addictions because we now know that it's the same thing. There actually really isn't a thing called alcoholism anymore. They call it alcohol use disorder. And alcohol use disorder is the same thing pretty much as any other drug addiction.
Mm-hmm.
These aren't actual book recommendations. They're on my to be read list though, because they sounded interesting. One is called Chasing the Scream, and I don't remember who wrote it.
No. Is it Gabor Mate?
I don't remember.
No. I think I know who you're talking about.
We can look
sorry.
it up.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's a good book.
But it's from what I've heard about it, it seems to have like gathered some really new information about the nature of addiction and has a really different insight into it. The other book that I've been meaning to read is Michael Pollan, who's usually a food writer, just came out with a book about psychedelics and their potential use for treating addiction and mental illness.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd be very interested to read that. So, yeah, I have not actually gotten around to reading these, but they sound good if anyone wants to look them up.
It looks like Chasing the Scream was written by Johan Hari.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I think he was also the guy who talked about how like with I think rats or something. But I guess some people were taking issue with that because I guess rats, there aren't like addict rats who just have that gene that kind of causes them. I mean, the idea is that like if they are put in a cage and they are given like things to do and enjoyable things, company with rats and things, then they don't drink the cocaine out of the little water bottle. But if they don't have those things, then they drink it all the time. But
have they studied like multiple generations of rats to see if that gene could appear? Because I mean, there always has to be like a first person to do something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about the genetics of addiction,
Right.
but
I don't either. I don't have it actually. No one in my family is an alcoholic.
Yeah, and I think he also used the example of returning GIs from Vietnam who got like addicted to heroin or whatever, and they came back and most of them didn't stay addicted to heroin. But it seems like that would be a supply issue. Like there probably wasn't just tons of heroin back in the, late 60s, early 70s after Vietnam. But
this is gonna show how privileged and ignorant I am, but is supply really an issue if you are truly addicted?
Well,
like, won't you go to great lengths? Like, I've never had a problem getting alcohol. Like, it was never hard to get alcohol. So I don't know what it's like to not have my drug of choice not be available.
I guess some of them smuggled it back, but it's not like it is now where it's, as prevalent as it was. I mean, we should look into this we'll know
I
more.
just mean, like, in general, like, people go to great lengths to get their fix. Like, my friend who was a nurse at KU for several years, people would come in with fake injuries and pain to get pain meds. Like,
yeah, but opiates as pain meds, I don't think was as common then.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't think that there was like I don't know when oxycodone and everything kind of came in, or OxyContin, but I know that even like in the past couple decades, that was when they started pushing, like the makers of that started kind of, it became more common, and that's how people have developed problems more now. Was like, I mean, there were people who became started using it as kind of, because they were interested in it, but then there were other people who like had injuries and they were put on all these pain medications and they became addicted that way.
This would be a really good topic to ask a Narcotics Anonymous group. Has anyone ever done a crossover group?
Kevin mentioned once that they have a group in this building where they but they're religious, so I guess I assume that there have been people who've come and done that before elsewhere, but
They still might talk to us, though.
they might.
Heathens that we are.
Well, yeah, I don't know anything about that. We might look it up, but yeah, we could have someone come in. That would be an interesting speaker opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah, it would be.
Oh, that's such a good idea.
Yeah, we should branch out with our speakers like that.
Hey, Simon.
Note to Simon, get somebody from Narcotics Anonymous to come in and speak.
The problem is with us getting speakers is that we just don't have a lot of people who go to a ton of different groups. I guess we could ask someone like Justin who seems to do that.
We could start
That's
going
true. We
to
don't
other
go to the
groups.
I know people from other groups, but I just don't,
If there's anybody at the office who would like to come and talk to us, we would support that.
Yeah.
Even if you want to talk about God, it's
if they want to
fine.
talk about God, that might be fun.
Yeah.
I put it out to the women's group on Saturdays at Group 1, and they seemed kind of like they weren't really sure about the fact that it was being recorded.
Yeah.
So
They could just, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I wonder what it is that keeps people from coming in.
Oh, I just think it takes time. I mean, we were really packing them in for a little while, but
I think a lot of people in our group, they kind of, I mean, we realized that it had been taken off the website. This one had.
This
yeah,
is?
I looked, it had been.
Off the central office website?
Yeah, it had been. And then I looked it up and I told Simon, and he got a hold of him and he said that I guess you had a meeting somewhere that had been canceled. Yeah.
I had a group. I had the mini paths group that nobody ever showed up to, so I wanted them to remove that one.
And I guess
they must have acted stupidly.
because I looked it up and I told him earlier this week, and he was
okay. Well, good. They were
so
just,
it's a
but
misunderstanding.
They took the secular option off of the kinds of.
They did.
Yeah, they did. I didn't see it on there.
I figured that they would. That's a battle that some people are having in some areas. They want to have that secular designation on the central office websites and stuff for their meetings, because some cities do, some cities don't. Quite frankly, though, for us, it doesn't really matter because we have our own websites, and that's how most people find us anyway.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good website. I especially compared to the Free Thinkers one, which seems kind of broken. But let me.
They have a separate website for that.
Yeah, they do.
I've never been to any of our websites.
We have a website for We Agnostics. We have a website for Free Thinkers. We have a website for this meeting, the Secular Speaker Meeting. And then we have a website that encompasses all of them called Secular AA Kansas City. So there's actually 4 different websites just for secular AA meetings in Kansas City, which is actually kind of cool because, people find the different websites.
Yeah, they took the secular one off, the secular option.
Secular option, yeah.
But
yeah.
the organizer
we could fight about that.
In me kind of was thinking we could probably combine all of them somehow.
We could. But my favorite of the websites is the one for this one, because we have the podcast that we put on it. But we probably could just use that one secular AA Kansas City site for everything. But I don't know. It's one of those things.
Well, we filled a certain amount of time.
Well, we did. It's almost an hour.
Yeah, we got. Yeah, I think, Simon, you can edit out what you want to. Go right ahead. I think we're done.
All right. Well, thank you.
Okay, let's clap.